All right, we're picking up the remainder of topics in Chapter 4 and starting with the topic then of attachment. As children get around 1 year of age, they become a lot more mobile as they're beginning to walk. And at this point, it becomes much more evident in terms of their relationships with family members. At that point, we can begin to see attachment patterns. Attachment being then a long-lasting emotional bond between one person and another. There we go. It turns out that the child's first attachments to others influence newer relationships. Now, how do we know if there is an attachment, a bonding between the infant and another person, the mother or caregiver? First of all, we look for proximity-seeking behavior. The child wants to be close to the mother or the caregiver, and so they will follow them, they will approach them. They might put their arms up, indicating they want to be picked up. Also, contact maintaining behavior is another indicator of attachment bonding. Contact maintaining behavior would be, for example, if the mother is carrying the child, wants to put them down, they cling to the mom. Or contact maintaining behavior also would include, as the child is going off to explore and play, that they look back to make eye contact with the mother to know that she is there. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth were some of the major researchers who began studying attachment patterns, and they devised a procedure in which they could study it called the strange situation. This involved the mother playing with the child, then leaving the room, a stranger coming in, the stranger leaving, the mother returning, and similar type of events. And by the child's responding to each of these situations, then they could gauge the type of attachment pattern. And what they found is 4 basic attachment patterns. First of all, secure attachment, and this is the most desirable. And here you would observe a closeness between the child and mother or caregiver, yet the child has a sense of confidence. So the child explores, plays. The caregiver is a base for exploration. They might come back to make physical contact with them. They might make eye contact as well. But you see a sense of closeness as well as confidence with these children. They found half to 2/3 of the infants that they studied demonstrated this pattern. They also observed a couple types of insecure attachment. There was some bonding, but it did not seem to be complete, so it was not fully secure. And this might involve the child demonstrating some fear, anger, or indifference towards the caregiver. Children with an insecure attachment lack confidence in general. They might cling to the caregiver. The first insecure type they referred to as avoidant. And this child engages in active exploration. They go off on their own to play, but with little regard for the mother, little interaction with them. And when the mother leaves, there's no apparent distress, doesn't seem to make them any difference. When the mother returns after being gone, they will either ignore them or even actively avoid the mother. And this suggests there's some problem with that attachment pattern. They found that in about 1 out of 6 toddlers that they studied. The other type of insecure pattern they referred to as resistant or ambivalent. And this type of child avoids active exploration. They don't get out on their own and play. They cling to the mother, and when the mother leaves, they demonstrate mixed behavior. That's why they called it ambivalent, because they seem not to know what to do. They might first seek contact with the mother, but then they might resist her or show anger towards her subsequently. So seems to be some difficulty deciding what that relationship is all about. They found that in about 1 of 6 infants. And they also found a disorganized attachment pattern, and no specific pattern of attachment can be identified here. The child might show fear of the parent. They might cry when the parent is present, or try to hit. They might just freeze up when the parent is present, or they might move very slowly, or engage in stereotypical movements, maybe flapping their arms, or turning round and round in circles. These children are also quite likely to become hostile and aggressive towards others. They found this disorganized attachment pattern in 1 out of 10 infants that they studied. Next, we'll have a look at some videos that will give you some insight into just what these attachment patterns look like in action. The first will be an interview with Gilda Morelli, who's done cross-cultural attachment research, and I'll go ahead and let that be sort of self-explanatory. Just a moment, I'll have to pause. Okay, let's go ahead and have a look at that video. I'm waiting for it to start up. Okay, I see it's not going to work that way. Let me go ahead and pause and get the video working, and then we'll be right back.
Truly attached babies are babies who greet their mothers on return, who are comforted by their presence and feel secure enough that in her presence they can go back and explore the environment. 2 others that appear commonly are babies who are avoidant in their attachment relationship. So those are babies who moms, when they come in, that she could not really come, continue on with their ideas, who are very reactive. That those are the who might freak their moms out when they come back, try and get in contact with her, but at the same time there's some hesitancy, some withdrawing, some pulling back.
Morelli's research has the strange situation amongst the people, Congo,
people with distance that allow on. And it was obvious that these children had a very rich social environment starting at birth, and we began to think, what did that mean in terms of their developing relationship, not only with their mothers and their fathers and their brothers, but all people who were with them. The segment is her child and told out what was expected of her. Little girls, as Ray say, what we did was we asked moms to get involved in some food preparation, since this was something that they were comfortable doing. She's looking at her mom right now, and her mom is working as well. Very happy. This is a point where mom is being asked to leave, and this is a stranger. The stranger is a local woman that the child doesn't know, keeping with the procedure, and that hurts really to get into the child and to help the child calm down while the mother is away. But as you can say, is very concerned about him leaving. And what she's looking at right now is the door, waiting to come back. And we've asked the mom to come back, and you can see right now that she's greeting her mom. She's looking back at the stranger. She's looking back at her mom again. And at this point, the stranger is leaving, and we're going to have a way say, follow her mom and sit down and play with her. There's some suggestion that many of the babies that we looked at in the procedure are securely attached. In fact, some pilot data suggests that over 80% of the infants are securely attached.
Few comments. The things that you see there that are indicators of secure attachment with Wasey, the little girl, is that when her mother was present at the beginning, she exuded confidence and readily explored, played, imitated her mother, showing that she was very comforted by her presence. When the mother left, notice that there was some concern. However, she was able to also deal with that. The stranger was not very comforting at all. That's typical of kids with a secure attachment. However, again, she was able to tolerate the stranger and soothe herself. You'll notice that she was looking towards the door. It seemed to indicate that she recognized that her mother would be back eventually. She didn't give up hope. And of course, when her mother returns, then that is very comforting to her. So all of those things suggest a secure attachment. Notice also that they noted a much higher percentage of children amongst the people that they studied having a secure attachment than the American and Northern European kids that were studied by Bowlby and Ainsworth. We think one of the reasons that there were more securely attached children in that particular cultural group is that the child was with the mother, caregiver, a great deal of the time, so there was a lot of time for that bond to form, and it's a fairly secure society where people don't hesitate to go out in public as well and feel fairly secure there, so that may have contributed. Now, next we'll have a look at a different attachment pattern, and this would be a resistant pattern of attachment. Let me get that for you. Just a moment, I'll pause it while I get that going. It won't actually be 3 minutes that they show here. They'll show just a portion of that segment. Okay, now there were indications there was miswithment here. The child didn't find it at all disturbing when his mother first left the room. On the other hand, the stranger seemed to be actually quite comforting to him. Also, you notice that eventually when his mother returns, he actually resists her, is sort of angry that the stranger has left. So those all would suggest not a completely secure attachment pattern. And then let's go to a third video, and this would is to give us an example of the avoidant type of insecure pattern. And this example of that avoidant pattern, notice there the child continues to play whether the parent's there or not. It doesn't seem to make them any difference. They just seem to be pretty much indifferent to the parent, the mother. So those are some indicators of lack of secure attachment. Now, actually, we would want to see more of the child's behavior than that, just those few moments, to see if that's a consistent behavior. Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead and then go to, get this going. There we go. Changes in attachment status are possible, although it tends to be stable and consistent. If a child is, for example, has an insecure attachment due to abuse or neglect, If the child is put into a home where they are taken care of and nurtured, they might move from insecure to secure attachment eventually. On the other hand, traumatic events potentially may sever a secure attachment. If the child loses their mother, for example, mother passes away or something like that, they may go from secure to insecure, not able to attach to another caregiver for some time, maybe even long term. So that's, but barring some major things happening, attachment status tends to stay pretty consistent. Here we have a list of predictors of attachment type. We notice that secure attachment is more likely under a number of circumstances. Insecure is more likely when we have others. I'm going to just ask you to take a moment, pause the video, and read over those items to become familiar with them. And when you're done, go ahead and resume, and we'll move on to the next thing. This chart indicates how infant attachment manifests later on in childhood relationships, romantic relationships, in adolescence, and then in adulthood in terms of personality traits. Now, as you look at the chart, you'll notice that each type is indicated by a circle. The relative size of each of those circles indicates the proportion of individuals who would have that type of attachment style. Notice also that there are a number of factors with each of these stages that influence the attachment style. So let's start with infant relationships. Majority of infants, yes, will form secure attachments, and this is likely if one has steady caregivers, responsive parenting, develops synchrony, that back and forth sort of interactions with the mother. Differential sensitivity, though, means that some children may be more sensitive if there are health problems, if there's maltreatment, domestic violence, or a lack of responsive parenting, a lack of steady caregivers or synchrony, then the child may end up as the anxious type of attachment, ambivalent or disorganized. Now, this then carries over into childhood, and majority of children, again, having a secure attachment in infancy, then will arrive in childhood pro-social. In other words, enjoying others and doing things that benefit others, pro-social with many friends. However, a smaller number become victims of bullies, or a bully victim who both bullies and also victimizes other children, or is the victim of bullies. And then some who have begun with a disorganized attachment may become bullies. And things that influence this would be the child's social context between age 2 and 11. Their family structure, are both parents available? Are there stresses within the family? Also their siblings. Are the siblings, do they get along well with them, or are there problems in terms of the parent maybe giving more attention to the brothers or sisters? Also neighborhood environment where they interact with other children, and early education as well come into play there. And so now the attachment pattern begins affecting other relationships. And as we get into adolescence, into the teen years, and into emerging adulthoods, the early 20s, then these attachment patterns again reappear in the form of romantic relationships. Once again, the majority of people, having had a secure attachment earlier, then are able to engage in happy romances. And some of the influences here would be one's high school experience or college that they attend, the peers that they hang around with, the others of their age group, the cultural group, and the adolescent's socioeconomic status. Now, on the other hand, if there has been a history of insecure attachment or disorganized attachment, then that's likely to continue unless there's some significant things in the adolescent's environment that enable them to begin establishing secure attachments with others. So that individual who began with an anxious type of attachment pattern, who may have been a victim of bullies, may end up becoming lonely, not having those relationships in adolescence. The individual who began with an ambivalent attachment, insecure attachment, who then there was considerable likelihood had been a bully victim in childhood, then might engage in stormy relationships where it's on and off, and maybe arguing and fighting with romantic partners. A disorganized attachment in infancy, if continued through childhood, where it might manifest as that child bullying others, then might become an individual who engages in domestic abuse in their romantic relationships. Then, as the person then moves into adulthood, again, these attachment patterns again manifest themselves in adult personality traits. And again, yes, majority of adults will have a secure, social, outgoing personality. But on the other hand, if they have not developed secure attachments earlier, then it's highly likely that they will end up in one of the other three categories again as an adult. Now, what things then influence the adult personality if they have had happy romances in adolescence and emerging adulthood? Whether they've had stormy relationships, their employment or lack thereof, if they have been lonely or subject to domestic abuse. And those that began with an anxious type of attachment pattern, this may continue eventually into adult personality, where the person becomes anxious, fearful, clingy, depressed. The ambivalent, insecure type of attachment tends to lead to a dismissive person who's a loner and angry as an adult. And the disorganized type of attachment pattern tends to lead to an adult who's erratic in their behavior, back and forth, unpredictable in their behavior, or pathologic, where they have some serious problems even in terms of harming others. So notice this cycle repeats itself, and of course the adult's personality also might influence their own child's attachment style, as we saw the influences on attachment. So the whole cycle may repeat itself. Social referencing is the child's way of dealing with new and different people and situations. When they're not sure how to respond, they look to trusted adults for emotional cues and guidance as to how to behave. Generally, children look at their mothers for this, but when strangers approach, often the child will prefer to look at how their father responds to that stranger. And speaking of fathers, father care is an important influence in the first couple years. Now, involvement of fathers and their effect varies from culture to culture. in Latino studies, which would include Hispanics, Mexican Americans, they found that the father's involvement was relatively high as compared to many other cultural groups, but it did vary depending upon the father's relationship with the mother. If it was a good, solid relationship, they'd be highly involved. But if they were separated, or if they were at odds with one another, there may be little or no involvement. The presence of the father in the first couple years helps children deal effectively with anger. Also, the father represents someone who the child can go to when they're interested in fun and adventure. Dads tend to be more encouraging. Mothers tend to be more critical of the child. Dads tend to be more physical in playing with the child, whereas mothers tend to be more into the caregiving aspects of it. As we mentioned, when strangers approach, also young children are comforted by their father's presence. So the involvement of both parents is ideal wherever possible. That is the best situation. An involved father also may benefit by increasing the mother's self-confidence and relieving stress on the mother, so the child is also less likely to experience excessive stress. So there you go. We picked up things on infant daycare in class, so I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully the video works okay, that you can at least pick up the things you need. And that's it. Thank you.